Emily Carter had spent over a decade working federal cases for the Department of Justice, unraveling corporate fraud and bringing white-collar criminals to their knees. But nothing had prepared her for the nightmare that hid behind a manicured lawn and a lemon-scented HOA welcome packet. After years in DC, she wanted a quiet life for her daughter, Ava. They chose Oak Ridge Estates for its reputation. Low crime, good schools, friendly neighbors. The homes were cookie-cutter perfect. White fences, flower beds, flags flapping gently in the breeze. It looked like the American dream, photoshopped to perfection. They moved in on a warm Saturday morning. Emily was unloading boxes, while Ava rode her skateboard up and down the driveway, earbuds in, soaking in her new freedom. Then she appeared. A woman in her mid-50s strode down the sidewalk like she owned it. Platinum blonde bob, oversized, sunglasses, tailored beige pantsuit, and a clipboard gripped like a weapon. She didn't smile as she approached, only narrowed her eyes behind designer lenses. "Excuse me," she said, stepping directly into Emily's personal space. "You're the new residents at 407. Emily offered her hand, calm and cordial. "That's right. I'm Emily Carter, and this is my daughter, Ava. We're just getting settled in." The woman ignored her hand. "I'm Karen Wilmington, HOA, President. I noticed your mailbox isn't regulation style. Oak Ridge has a strict aesthetic standard. Black iron only. No personalized numbers or decals." Emily glanced at the mailbox. It was the same one the previous owner had used. "Noted. We'll get that updated." Karen made a small clicking sound with her tongue, scribbled something on her clipboard, then looked at Ava. "Also, no skateboarding on sidewalks. It's in the bylaws. I'll have a copy delivered." Emily's expression didn't change, but inside her mind began filing details like evidence, posture, tone, the microaggressions cloaked in condescension. Understood. Karen didn't leave right away. She looked around the driveway, eyeing the moving truck like it offended her. "Some of the neighbors are very sensitive to noise. Please be finished unloading before dusk." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked away, heels clicking like a metronome. Ava skated up, pulling out her earbuds. Who was that? Emily exhaled slowly. The welcoming committee, apparently. They didn't talk about it again that day. Emily had seen people like Karen before. She had testified against them in courtrooms. But something about this encounter sat wrong in her chest. Not just the controlling tone, or the way Karen had spoken directly to Ava with such disdain. It was something deeper, predatory, territorial. Emily hadn't lived in this neighborhood for even 24 hours, and already someone was making it clear they were being watched. That night, after Ava went to bed, Emily sat in the kitchen, sipping tea and reviewing the HOA handbook that had been slid under her door sometime during dinner. Page after page of vague language, disguised as community standards. No visible toys on lawns after 6 p.m. Sidewalk chalk is discouraged. Residents may not alter property exteriors without prior visual approval from the board. It's read less like a set of guidelines and more like a declaration of control. Emily flipped to the back page and found it. President. Karen Wilmington term. Indefinite. Re-elected 6 years in a row. Of course she was. People like Karen always were. Emily smiled to herself. Not the kind of smile people gave when they were happy, but the kind she gave when she saw something coming, long before anyone else did. "I just wanted peace," she whispered into the quiet kitchen. "But if it's a war she wants..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Because the last person you want to provoke is a woman trained to take down empires. especially one who just wants to protect her daughter. The first warning came the next morning. Emily stepped out to grab the paper and found a slip of bright pink cardstock tucked into her doorframe. At first, she thought it might be a neighbor's note or a friendly greeting. It wasn't. HOA non-compliance, notice violation, unauthorized recreational activity on driveway details. Minor seen skateboarding after 6 p.m., causing potential noise, disturbance. Next infraction may result in formal citation. There was no signature, just the HOA seal at the bottom and a list of fines. Emily stared at it, silent. It hadn't even been 24 hours. Ava had only been riding in their own driveway. That afternoon, another note arrived, this time folded and placed directly in their mailbox. Ava had left her basketball by the porch, and apparently, that was visual clutter, a violation of Section 4C. Emily read it twice, then neatly folded it and dropped it into a growing pile in a kitchen drawer. She silently labeled exhibits. She hadn't told Ava about the first notice. No need to worry her over passive-aggressive post-its. But by the end of the week, it wasn't avoidable. Ava stormed through the front door, red-faced and furious. She followed me, Mom. Emily turned away from the sink, instantly alert. Who followed you? Karen. I was walking home from school and saw her across the street. Every time I looked back, she was there, just walking behind me. Not close enough to say something, but definitely following me. I even took a different route, and she turned the same way. Emily's hands clenched the towel on the counter. Did she say anything? No. She just stared, like she was waiting for me to do something wrong. Emily kept her voice calm. Next time, take your phone out, record her. If she tries anything, come straight home or go to a neighbor we trust. Ava nodded, still trembling. Why is she so obsessed with us? I didn't do anything. Emily crouched to meet her daughter's eyes. You didn't. People like her don't need a reason. Sometimes they just pick targets. That night, Emily retrieved a wireless camera from one of her DOJ field kits and mounted it under the porch light, just in case. By week's end, the tone of Karen's surveillance had shifted. The violations became more precise, more personal. One note said, Ava's laugh was disruptive to neighborhood tranquility. Another cited a complaint about non-standard curtains, visible from the sidewalk. Then came the email from the official HOA account, subject. Concerns regarding minor resident at 407 Karen had copied the board, accusing Ava of walking across a neighbor's lawn, loitering near mailboxes, and possibly being responsible for a missing garden gnome. Emily didn't respond, not immediately. Instead, she called a friend in records at the DOJ and asked a favor, pull any public incidents tied to Karen Wilmington's name. Then she opened her private investigation folder on her laptop and typed, case title, Oak Ridge HOA, subject, Wilmington, Karen, pattern of harassment click, save, encrypt. Emily had spent her career putting men in prison for fraud, manipulation, and abuse of power. This was no different, only this time, it wasn't about indicting a stranger. It was about defending Ava. And if Karen wanted to make this a game of pressure, intimidation, and control, she picked the wrong opponent. Because Emily Carter didn't just fight cases, she won them. It was a sunny Saturday morning when the first real storm hit. Emily and Ava were sitting at their kitchen table, enjoying breakfast, when an email alert buzzed on Emily's phone. She glanced down and frowned at the sender. Karen Wilmington, HOA president. The subject line was blunt. Urgent, vandalism incident at 315 Oak Ridge, involving minor resident. Emily's fingers paused as she opened the message. The email accused Ava of damaging a neighbor's rose garden. The neighbor directly across the street, a woman named Mrs. Franklin, who was known for her immaculate landscaping. Attached was a grainy, blurry snapshot from a security camera. It showed a figure crouched near the flowers, hands obscured, wearing dark clothes and a hood pulled low. The image was almost too vague to identify anyone, but Karen's email insisted it was Ava, pointing to the slender frame. Emily's pulse quickened. The timing was too precise. The accusation too convenient. She remembered Ava had been home since morning, helping with unpacking. She had also checked the backyard just a few minutes ago. Emily replied curtly, "Please provide the original footage from the security camera for review." Ava was home during the time in question and denies involvement. Her fingers hovered before sending, a flicker of anger rising. Karen was pushing her luck. Emily wasn't the kind to be bullied. Ava sat quietly across the table, sensing her mother's tension. "Mom, I didn't do anything. I swear." Emily reached across and squeezed her daughter's hand. "I know, and we're going to prove it." The following day, Emily went door to door, speaking with neighbors who might have seen something. Most shook their heads, unwilling to get involved in what they saw as HOA drama. But one neighbor, Mr. Patel, mentioned seeing a hooded figure darting out of Mrs. Franklin's yard late Friday night. Emily's gut told her Karen was orchestrating something more sinister than petty complaints. She had to find the truth before Karen's lies caused irreparable damage. Using her DOJ contacts, Emily obtained a subpoena for the neighbor's security footage. She stayed up late, watching the video frame by frame. The figure was indeed there, but the build was stockier than Ava's slim frame. The hood obscured the face, but the gait was unfamiliar. The moment a second figure appeared, someone clearly handing over a small object, the real story became clear. Ava was being framed. Emily's fingers flew over her laptop, preparing an email to the HOA board and Karen herself, demanding a retraction, an immediate cessation of harassment. But she didn't stop there. Knowing Karen thrived on public spectacle, Emily scheduled a discreet meeting with the HOA board president's assistant, someone sympathetic who'd been quietly frustrated with Karen's iron grip. At the meeting, Emily laid out her findings, the security footage, witness accounts, and the pattern of escalating intimidation. The assistant nodded slowly, eyes widening as the evidence mounted. "Karen's gone too far," the assistant admitted. "She's been targeting other families too, but no one's had the guts to speak up." Emily smiled thinly. "That ends now." The next HOA meeting was set for the coming week, and Emily prepared to attend. Not as a passive homeowner, but as a force ready to expose Karen's vendetta. That evening, as Emily reviewed her notes, Ava pulled her close. "Mom, what if Karen never stops? What if she tries to get me arrested?" Emily hugged her tightly. "Then we fight, together." But deep inside, Emily knew this was only the beginning. Karen had just thrown down the gauntlet, and Emily was ready to pick it up. The weekly HOA block party was supposed to be a chance for neighbors to unwind. A chance for Emily and Ava to finally feel like part of the community. But as Emily watched from across the street, a pit formed in her stomach. Karen Wilmington was there, naturally. The same cold, calculating woman who'd turned their lives upside down. Ava was laughing with a few kids near the lemonade stand when Karen suddenly appeared at her side. Without warning, Karen grabbed Ava's wrist, her grip sharp and unforgiving. The sudden contact made Ava startle and pull away, her smile vanishing. "You don't belong here," Karen hissed, her voice low but loud enough for the nearest neighbors to hear. "Tell your mother to leave before things get worse." Emily's heart hammered. She stepped forward, her eyes locked onto Karen's. For a split second, Karen's eyes flashed with something unreadable. Satisfaction. Defiance? But then Karen released Ava and turned, walking away as if nothing had happened. Ava's face was pale, and tears welled up in her eyes. Emily rushed over, pulling her daughter into a protective embrace. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Ava shook her head, voice barely audible. She grabbed me, Mom." Emily's jaw clenched. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was assault. She wanted to yell, to call out Karen in front of everyone, but she knew better. Karen craved attention. Feeding into her drama would only make things worse. Instead, Emily whispered, "We're going home. Later, safe behind the locked door of their house." Emily pulled out her phone and dialed the local police department. She explained the situation calmly, but firmly. Karen had physically grabbed her minor daughter during a public event. Within the hour, an officer arrived to take a statement. Ava repeated her story, trembling but composed. Emily answered questions, providing the stack of notices, emails, and photos she had been collecting like a weaponized dossier. The officer nodded gravely. "We'll look into it. Assaulting a minor is a serious charge." Emily thanked him, then sat down at her kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers. For the first time, the full weight of what was happening hit her. This wasn't just an overbearing HOA president. This was a woman who had crossed every line. She had underestimated Karen's resolve. Or worse, Karen had underestimated her. Emily was no ordinary homeowner. She had fought battles in courtrooms and in back rooms, under harsh lights and tougher questions. This fight was different, personal, but it was one she was determined to win. She reached for her laptop and began drafting a letter. This time it would be official. A formal complaint to the HOA board, a demand for disciplinary action, and a clear warning that she would not tolerate violence against her family. But she knew the letter alone wouldn't be enough. Karen was dangerous. She needed allies. Over the next few days, Emily quietly spoke to other neighbors. A few admitted they had been too scared to stand up to Karen's bullying. One elderly couple spoke of unfair fines and property damage accusations. Another young family mentioned late-night phone calls threatening legal action. Emily listened, recording every word, piecing together a pattern. Karen was a tyrant, and Emily was ready to expose her. That night, as Ava fell asleep peacefully, for the first time in weeks, Emily sat by her side, her mind already racing through the next moves. This wasn't just about mailboxes or noise complaints anymore. This was war, and Emily Carter was prepared to bring down the Queen of Oak Ridge Estates. Emily knew that fighting Karen Wilmington wouldn't be a battle of shouts and scenes. Karen thrived on drama, but Emily's strength was quiet, calculated precision, the kind honed by years of working the darkest corners of justice. She started by filing an official assault report with the local police department. The officers took her statement seriously, given the mounting evidence and Karen's increasingly aggressive behavior. But Emily knew the police could only do so much. The HOA was a private organization, and Karen's true power came from behind that veneer of community leadership. Next, Emily turned her attention to the HOA's shaky legal ground. Digging through public records and HOA filings, Emily discovered something startling. Karen Wilmington's term as president had expired nearly a year ago, yet she had been acting with full authority, issuing fines, making decisions, and intimidating neighbors, without any formal re-election or legal approval. Armed with this discovery, Emily drafted a formal complaint to the HOA board highlighting Karen's expired credentials and questioning the legitimacy of her actions. Emily's letter was meticulous, citing relevant statutes and HOA bylaws. She copied it to every board member, the property management company, and the local county office responsible for community oversight. The reaction was electric. Board members who had quietly resented Karen's iron-fisted rule began to speak up. A few neighbors, once too frightened to voice concerns, reached out to Emily with stories of their own. Fines for trivial infractions, threats to sue, even sabotage of property. One neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, confessed he had found nails scattered on his lawn, suspecting Karen had planted them to punish him for refusing to comply with an arbitrary parking rule. Emily listened carefully, gathering every detail, every whispered accusation. She was building a case, one that could not be ignored. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. Residents filled the chairs, their faces a mix of relief and cautious hope. Karen arrived late, clearly rattled. Her usual confident smirk faltered as Emily stood and addressed the crowd. "I'm not here to vilify anyone," Emily began calmly. "I'm here to restore fairness and legality to this community. We have a president acting without legal authority, harassing residents, and even assaulting a minor." The room buzzed with murmurs. Emily continued, "I filed a formal complaint and provided evidence. The question now is whether Oak Ridge Estates will be a place of fairness or fear." Karen's eyes burned with fury. She stood, attempting to regain control, but her voice wavered. "This is a personal vendetta. I have served this community for years. These accusations are baseless." But the tide had turned. Several neighbors stood to back Emily's claims. The assistant board president, visibly uncomfortable, called for a vote to investigate Karen's leadership and actions. By the meeting's end, Karen had lost the confidence of the board and the community. Within days, she resigned. But Emily knew the fight wasn't over. During Karen's frantic packing, Emily received an anonymous tip from a neighbor who'd been too scared to speak out publicly. Karen had been siphoning HOA funds for years. Ghost invoices, fake contractors, maintenance projects that never happened. Emily passed the tip to a trusted contact in the district attorney's office. Weeks later, Karen was arrested on charges of embezzlement and fraud. Oak Ridge Estates was finally free from her reign. But Emily's resolve only deepened. She wasn't just fighting for her daughter anymore. She was fighting for every neighbor who'd lived in fear. And if Karen ever tried to return, Emily would be waiting. Karen Wilmington's arrest sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge Estates. For years, residents had whispered behind closed doors about her controlling nature, but the charges of embezzlement and fraud confirmed their worst fears. The news spread like wildfire. Neighbors who had remained silent suddenly found their voices. Emily sat in her kitchen, sipping cold coffee as she scrolled through the community's private social media group. Comments poured in. Relief, outrage, gratitude. Many called her a hero. But Emily's thoughts were elsewhere. The damage Karen had done ran deeper than stolen money or petty rules. She had poisoned the community with fear and suspicion. Some neighbors still looked at Emily and Ava with wary eyes, as if her fight against Karen had disturbed a fragile balance. One afternoon, a knock at the door jolted Emily from her thoughts. It was Mrs. Franklin, the very neighbor Karen had accused Ava of vandalizing. "I wanted to apologize," Mrs. Franklin said quietly. "I believed Karen's lies about your daughter. I was wrong." Emily smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you. It means a lot." But not everyone was ready to forgive. Anonymous letters continued to arrive, thinly veiled threats warning Emily to back off. One was slipped under her door, reading, "People like you don't belong here." Another shattered the piece of vine. A quiet Sunday afternoon, when someone slashed the tires on Emily's car. Ava asked less and less to go outside. Emily caught her daughter's once bright eyes growing dim with anxiety. The neighborhood had become a battleground, and they were still in the crossfire. Determined not to let fear rule, Emily organized a community meeting, not to attack, but to heal. She invited everyone, including those who had been hesitant to speak before. The turnout was larger than she expected. Some neighbors shared stories of how Karen's reign had affected them. Others talked about what they wanted Oak Ridge Estates to become. For the first time in years, real conversations happened, but amid the hope, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's shadow lingered. She had made powerful enemies during her time as HOA president, people who might try to reclaim control or retaliate. One evening, Emily found a strange car parked across the street, headlights off, engine humming softly. She jotted down the license plate and reported it to the police. Emily knew this was just the beginning of a new kind of battle, a quieter, more insidious war. As the sun set over Oak Ridge Estates, Emily held Ava close and whispered, "We'll get through this together." Because even after the fall of a tyrant, the scars she left behind took time to heal. The tense calm that had settled over Oak Ridge Estates was fragile, like thin ice over dark water. Emily could feel it every day. The quiet looks, the hushed whispers, the occasional shadow lingering just a little too long. One afternoon, while Emily was walking Ava home from school, a car slowly pulled up beside them. The window rolled down, revealing a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. "Ms. Carter?" he asked. Emily nodded cautiously. "Yes, my name's David Harris. I live 2 streets over. I've been wanting to talk to you." Emily raised an eyebrow, but kept her expression neutral. David continued, "I've watched what you've been doing. Standing up to Karen. Uncovering the truth. You have a lot of people behind you, even if they're too scared to say it out loud." Emily was surprised. "Why come forward now?" David glanced over his shoulder, then lowered his voice. "Because Karen wasn't acting alone. There's more going on beneath the surface. Some of the board members knew about the embezzlement and turned a blind eye. And there's talk of others trying to take control now that Karen's gone." Emily's pulse quickened. "Do you have proof?" David reached into his glove compartment and handed her a small envelope. Inside were photocopies of financial records, emails, and notes. A treasure trove of evidence implicating multiple HOA officials in covering up Karen's activities. Emily's mind raced. This was the breakthrough she needed. "Why risk this?" she asked. David hesitated. "I'm tired of living in fear. I want this neighborhood to be a place where families can feel safe again." Emily felt a flicker of hope. "We'll need to move carefully. If the wrong people find out you gave this to me." David nodded grimly. "I understand." Over the next few days, Emily worked with David to quietly gather more evidence and identify allies within the community and local government. She contacted trusted contacts at the district attorney's office, sharing the new information and requesting a deeper investigation. At the same time, Emily doubled down on community outreach, organizing block parties, neighborhood watch, meetings, and open forums to rebuild trust among residents. Ava began to smile more often, cautiously reclaiming her childhood, but Emily knew this was far from over. The corrupt HOA officials still held power, and their influence ran deep. One evening, Emily found a handwritten note slipped under her door. "Stop digging, or there will be consequences." Her jaw tightened. The threat was clear, but Emily wasn't backing down. She thought of Ava, her daughter, The reason she had fought this fight from the start. This ends now, Emily whispered. With David's help and a growing coalition of neighbors, Emily prepared to confront the entrenched corruption head-on. Oak Ridge Estates was on the brink of transformation, and Emily was ready to lead the charge. The investigation into the HOA corruption was gaining momentum. The district attorney's office moved swiftly, issuing subpoenas and freezing accounts. The community was beginning to breathe again, hopeful, renewed. Emily sat in her living room late one night, reviewing the evidence she and David had compiled. Ava was asleep upstairs, finally safe from the nightmare that had plagued her for months. Then the phone rang. It was an unknown number. Emily hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice whispered, "You think you're winning. You don't know the whole story. Karen was just the surface. The real puppeteer is someone you trust." Before Emily could respond, the line went dead. Her heart pounded. Was this a bluff, a warning, or the truth? The next day, Emily shared the call with David and a trusted investigator from the DA's office. They decided to dig deeper into the HOA board, past the obvious suspects. What they uncovered shocked them all. Documents, emails, and financial transactions led to a name that no one had expected. The HOA's property manager, a quiet man named Paul Simmons. Paul had been overseeing the community's finances for years. The perfect cover for embezzlement and manipulation. Worse, he had cultivated close relationships with many residents, including Emily herself. A knot tightened in Emily's stomach. She had trusted him during meetings, confided in him when she first joined the community. Could someone so close have orchestrated everything? Confronting Paul was delicate. Emily and David arranged a private meeting under the guise of discussing community improvements. Paul arrived, smiling warmly. Emily laid out the evidence, the discrepancies, the hidden accounts, the communications that tied him to Karen's schemes. Paul's smile faded. His eyes darkened. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "Karen was reckless. She threatened to expose everything. I had to control the situation. For the community's sake." Emily's voice was steady. "By hurting families, framing a child, embezzling funds," Paul shrugged. "Sometimes sacrifices are necessary." Emily felt a surge of anger, but kept calm. "This ends now. You're going to face justice, just like Karen." Paul stood, eyes cold. "You think you've won? You're only scratching the surface. There are others, more powerful than you realize. Be careful who you trust." With that, he left. A chilling warning that the battle might not be over. In the weeks that followed, Emily worked closely with authorities to dismantle the corrupt network. Paul was arrested and charged, and more investigations were launched. As the dust settled, Emily reflected on the long, painful journey. The threats, the betrayals, the fight to protect her daughter and community. Ava's laughter returned, brighter than ever, and Emily knew that no matter what shadows lingered, she had uncovered the truth and stood up for what was right. But one night, as she checked the mailbox, Emily found a small, unmarked envelope. Inside was a single note. "Watch. You're back." A shiver ran down her spine. The war for Oak Ridge Estates might be over, but the story was far from finished.